All right, folks, welcome to another edition of Manufacturing Growth Talks. I'm your host, Dan Burgos. And as you know, what we do here is we interview industry leaders in the manufacturing sector for them to share their story, share the lessons they learned, the challenges they came across. And so we all get to enjoy and hear those learnings and learn from their lessons. Today, I am joined by Stephen Lehocky. He is the Chief Operating Officer of National Circuit Assembly, a manufacturing organization based out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so join me in welcoming Stephen. Stephen, thank you for joining us today.
Good morning, Dan. It's really wonderful to be here and virtually welcome you to Texas on a beautiful day, which means it's not 100 degrees, it's not 40 degrees. We don't have tornadoes or hail.
Beautiful, I know, we're in that day. Right between. So we just passed the tornado. We're getting ready to go into the summer time frame here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, good stuff. So let's start off with saying, how tell us about your journey a little bit at a high level, and then we'll dive into the details. Tell us what your history's been that led you to where you are today.
Well, it's interesting. I started off life, I always wanted to be an astronaut. I grew up in the 60s, and I watched all the rockets take off. That was my dream, to be an astronaut. I went to the University of Illinois and got a bachelor's in mechanical engineering, and spent 17 years with Hughes Space and Communication. It had been bought by Boeing satellite systems, so gone by different names. Spent a lot of time in engineering, focusing on design for manufacturability and assembly. Then I got into the quality portion. At that time, they brought in lean. They didn't call it lean at the time. I had to take a course. I was one of those leaders that, I've got to go take this 3-day course, and I'm too busy to do it. And I went and I took the course. 3 days, I came out and I said, I love this. Now, how do I find out the secret sauce? So I said, well, if I apply to be an instructor, they'll have to tell me the secret sauce. So I went through and that was my first venture into lean manufacturing, followed quickly by Six Sigma. At Boeing, I went through and became a master black belt with that organization. After about 17 years, I decided I wanted to look around. I was living in California at the time, moved out to Texas, where they have a lot bigger houses, and started my manufacturing journey. I worked for Black & Decker Quickset. So I kind of went from a very technical, we maybe did 6 satellites a year, to doing 1 billion parts in a year. So it was quite a change to go through that process of mass, well, not really mass customization, but highly customized job shop to a real high level production environment. Shortly after that, I went to work for Jostens, which I make class rings. So I've made a few Super Bowl rings. That's an interesting experience. And during that time, I really got involved in mass customization and quality, and helped them get qualified for ISO certification at that time. Then I went to another manufacturing company that builds basically mining equipment. These are big tractors that do above ground mining. So now I'm working in huge, several ton manufacturing environment with steel and welding and a lot different from stamping. So, each one of these progresses that I'm going through, I'm learning a lot of new aspects about the manufacturing process. After a few years, the consulting bug bit me. I spent 14 years consulting. I traveled all over the world, mostly working with the U.S. Army in their Lean Six Sigma deployment throughout the world. and then doing model simulations of airports and people moving through the airports. A lot of time on the road. Got got homesick after 14 years. Took another job working in medical. So I worked for Metrics, which they were competing at that time. The Invisalign, the patent for the Invisalign was running out, so we had a product. So again, very customized, mass customized product. When at that point, I went more into consulting, but this time in a different realm. I did more business consulting. So I worked with a company that we focused on doing turnarounds. And that's really, where I'd say now I'd gotten an MBA and I'm working on my PhD in industrial engineering. But in that consulting firm, I really got to understand the accounting system and the financial systems of running a company and what those mechanisms are. So a lot of experience in a lot of different areas in companies.
I heard
Yeah.
I heard the Army, I heard consulting, I heard Boeing, mass customization. By the way, congratulations on your upcoming PhD that you're working on. So sounds like there's a lot to cover here. So why don't we start with why don't we start? Let's go back in memory lane, right? Let's go back to the Boeing days, a big
Right.
organization, probably very different environment than the things that are happening today as we record this. Can you
Right.
take us back? What was the situation there, and what was your role in all of it, and what was that experience like?
So when I started at Boeing, it is a big company. We had about 85,000 engineers throughout the world. Lots of very smart people that you're working with. My role was started out as basically a draftsman. So even at that time, I was still working on the drafting table with vellum. We soon went into CAD when I got there, and then I went into program management. And so I led a series of small engineering teams, and we would look at different ways to basically handle the satellite while it was on the ground. So we would build the design and manufacture the carts that move the satellites, the test equipment for the satellites, the shipping for the satellites. An interesting and one of the things I say, and I say this all kidding, I've been in every organization within the company. And I sometimes joke and I say, I know the lies that the engineers say, the quality people say, the manufacturing people say, because I used to say those when I was the leader of those departments. Meaning, I know what it's like. I know what their challenges are. I know how they think. I know what areas they really strive in, but I also know where some of their challenges are in that process. One of my challenges, one of my first designs I built, I had the opportunity to go to the company that was manufacturing it. A very nice gentleman. He said, "Well, Steve, let me take you through this process and show you how you should have designed this so I could actually build it." It wasn't really that bad, but I did learn a lot of lessons about how to communicate. From an engineering perspective, how do you communicate with the people that are doing the manufacturing? How to think about what they have to do to manufacture the product. It's more than just pictures. Somebody has to put those together, and looking at that struggle is pretty significant. And you have that from the quality area too. The quality area. They have to do the inspections. They got to ensure that there are processes in place that that the product can be built to the highest level of quality and at an affordable cost.
Let me jump into something that you said earlier. You said you've led several of these organizations, these functions, and you're intimate with the struggles and kind of how to. Can you, for our listener, I think it'd be beneficial to know how, because a lot of times you go into a company and there's silos, right? Quality people don't work well manufacturing, or they have complaints about one another. The engineers about the people, they don't know what they're making,
Right.
and the people. So, since you've been in all of those areas, what worked for you in order to make things come together? Maybe give a couple of examples of one angle or another, manufacturing to engineering or engineering to quality, or something that gives people, okay, how do I get past this? Because I've heard that before in other organizations.
So I think the first thing to come to an understanding is that this tension is normal. It is always going to be there. I equate it to siblings. I always talk about engineering, quality, and manufacturing being siblings. They're very much related, but they have their differences, and that's good. You don't want to eliminate those differences. Where we have to work at as leaders is how do we get people to communicate those differences in a way that people can understand them, but also in a way that people can hear and comprehend. And that's a difficult process. The communication process, I think when I think about my career, how to communicate. So we would have meetings with engineering and manufacturing, and there would be cases where, we have 4 screws holding something in. And from a manufacturing perspective, I understand what the engineers did and why they put the 4 screws there. But I also know that there's going to be a cost associated with that. There's going to be something or someone that's going to have to put those 4 screws in there. There's 4 opportunities for there to be a quality issue and cost. And so one of the things I'm working with is, okay, how can we compromise? How can we talk about different solutions that work both for the manufacturing, for the quality, and for the engineer to get to the same objective. So I think when we look at some of the struggles that we have, going back to the silos that you have, there's a lot of kind of passing over the wall that happens.
Very typical.
And where I find the most successful designs is when you can bring the manufacturing person, the quality person, the engineering group, the procurement group. You can bring all these people right at the beginning of the project and work together as a team, because everybody's going to have different knowledge that comes in. We have cases where engineers will design a product. So National Circuit Assembly, we do printed circuit board assemblies. And they'll have a design that'll have a part that is gonna be phased out, and so my procurement people are they're oh my God, what are we gonna do? We got to find these parts. Well, if we'd involved the procurement people ahead of time, they could have been doing some of that research to feed back that this part's gonna become obsolete in the next couple of years. What are our plans to handle that? So it has a lot to do with putting the right mix of the team together. But as a leader, one of the things I found, and what I shared when I was teaching Master Black Belts, the most important person to me is a person who can ask the right questions. As a leader, honestly, I can buy answers cheap. There are a lot of
You way
people
to
that
put
will
it?
sell answers cheap.
Right.
What is hard is who can ask the questions that nobody is thinking about. And that's where you got to get that team dynamic going, because that's when people start to ask those questions that people don't think about. And so, putting together these, integrated product teams are very, very, to me, very important to essentially bring a product, into production.
So I guess what I'm taking from that is bring a team together, creating an environment for collaboration to happen, get them engaged so it's not I threw it over the fence and now I'm left with this that I had no
Yes.
input into. And then also, I guess, being proactive with your example about procurement, right? We could have been doing the research way before, you finalized this design and told you, hey, this part's not going to be viable because of XYZ, or we have this alternative, or whatever the case, and avoid a lot of the issues, which is very typical in design environments where a lot of the revisions end up happening towards the end of the rollout phase and what have you. So that's good. All
Yeah,
right,
and
so
I think also to be a little bit biased, because I am heavily more in the manufacturing portion of it. There is a challenge, because a lot of times a lot of the money and time is spent upfront in the design process, and
mhm.
then it's passed over to engineering, and they're like, okay, can you make this 40% cheaper, because we got to get it to market, and they don't want to go back to engineering and spend the money to re-engineer a product. We already made the molds. And it's like, well, if you'd brought me in, I could have saved you so much more
Exactly. And
ahead
a
of
lot of
time.
organizations don't realize that a lot of the challenges that already happen in manufacturing can be prevented by focusing on the design processing and making them more swift.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was your time in Boeing. So you said earlier that at some point you got to where you wanted to see what was out there. What triggered that, and what was your thought process at that point?
So that's an interesting that's an interesting story. So I had a mentor at Boeing. She was the general manager. She was over quality and safety. So as a master black belt, I was assigned to her organization um, to work on projects and lead Lean Six Sigma teams. She gave a presentation at ASQ meeting on her different roles and her history in uh, in uh, her journey through different companies. And I got to think, well, I've been at Boeing for 13 years. What else is out there? How can I take this and apply? And again, at that time, I had gone through kind of the Lean Six Sigma portion, so I saw a lot of relevance in high volume activities, and so I was very curious about that. I think one of the things, and you'll probably ask me something about my recommendations for people, but curiosity is extremely, extremely important to a person's success in their career and in life. You should always be curious, and that's what really drove me, was curiosity. It was, what is it like to be in high volume uh, production environment where in 2 minutes you can make 30,000 bad pieces of product. How do you manage that? How do you what is that like? What are the challenges?
Right.
Uh,
Right. And so
yeah.
where'd
So
that take you? Where'd you land next?
so after Boeing, I went to Black and Decker Quickset. So Black and Decker Quickset, they make basically doorknobs, the lock and key. So we were a feeder plant to the assembly plant. So a lot of stamping, pressing, injection molding, very very high speed environment. We had bins and bins of products that we would do. Um,
Can you
you know,
share a little bit about the situation when you walked in there? Were they having the 30,000 parts in a couple hours that were, that they need to be reworked or maybe scrapped? Or what was the situation? Or was it, a different situation? What was that like?
yeah. So there were definitely challenges that the company ran with. One of the one of the projects I really worked a lot on was injection molding, and that we were getting the assembly plant did the plating, and they were getting some defects in that plating, and we were working to figure out the cause of those defects. It's an interesting story, but and when you're plating in brass, you can get a red tint to the brass. It's one of the defects, and all of us, Lean Six Sigma people, were just racking our head, charts and numbers and
This data all
statistics and
over.
going all through all this stuff trying to figure out, and it was very irregular. There's no patterns.
You can figure a pattern. Yeah, I always look for
We
that.
couldn't
That's
find
good.
anything out. Well, as it turned out, the the problem was that the ladies, when they would do the inspection, if they wore red, the red would reflect in the
Okay.
brass, and so they would throw it up. They would put it in as a reject. So, so after all
Yeah.
this analysis, which is to say, one of my pet peeves, as a leader, is you have to be on the floor. I'm on the floor all the time. We have about 100 people. I know I know all of them. I talk to all of them. I talk to them about what their work is, what are their challenges. It's very difficult to be a leader. It's very difficult to be somebody in the improvement area and not really spend the time, as we say, get your hands dirty.
Yeah.
There are times I'll sit down on the floor and I'll be doing work, and people are like, why is the
What are you doing,
CEO
right?
down there, doing the work? Well, it helps me wrap my head around what it is, what are they going through? What are their challenges in that process?
Let me delve into that a little bit. So, what gave you that, I guess, perception? How did you come about discovering that was important to you? How did you learn that?
Wow, that's interesting. I think I think that's part of my personality in growing up. My dad was he was an electrical engineer, and but we, as I said, I grew up in the '60s, and I remember with my dad, we'd be taking the car apart and changing the head gasket. So a lot of hands-on. I'm heavy into hobbies. My daughter and I build high-powered model rockets. So I think it's ingrained in myself to want to have the hands-on process. I think, though, what I saw from that is that I could relate again to what is happening on the floor. What are people going through? Just as I talked about relating to quality as an organization and engineering as an organization. When you get to the manufacturing, you really have to relate to what the people are doing on the floor, and sometimes we take for granted what are some of the challenges that they have, because a lot of people, they think that, well, I just have to suck it up, or I just have to figure it out myself, and they don't really want to float a lot of problems. And sometimes that's a little bit cultural. So our company is highly Asian, Vietnamese. Confrontation is something that they're not comfortable with. not meaning like fighting, but meaning that they don't really want to talk about problems so much.
Like being direct about things, like our culture
Right.
is more like, yeah.
Right. So for me, it's being on the floor and asking them questions like, wow, is that hard? Can I try that? Can you teach me how to do that? And then you
Interesting.
get the conversation. They're like, well, if I really had this thing, oh, okay. Well, now I'm going somewhere. I can talk with the leaders of the departments and say, can we get these people some of the tools that they need, or change the process in a way that makes it more efficient.
I got,
Yeah,
can I let me jump in for a moment there, because I think what you're saying is so powerful, because from your upbringing, your parents, and now with your kids, you've developed that bond, that closeness, that relationship, and it just like you said earlier, right? Departments are like siblings. I equate leadership a lot to parenting,
right,
and
right,
so I feel like what you're saying cuts through a lot of potential issues in terms of people not voicing their concerns. But I think also what you're doing is, and I emphasize it because I hear it so little, and I think this is a big nugget for leaders out there spending time with their employees, even if it's shop floor. And look at you, like even doing the work, you're building a bond, you're building you're opening yourself up to them so they can themselves up to you, but they
right,
also feel empowered, they also feel like they can trust you, that you're a person. I couldn't tell you how many times I hear from people from the floor, we've been telling them about this problem forever and they've never done anything. They always tell us, oh, we're working on it, and 5 years go by and nothing, and people get discouraged and disengaged. So I think it's great. I think it's amazing that you're doing that. And so we've talked about why it's important. And what have you seen as a result of doing that? What on the other end of doing that, or having that habit?
so it's very interesting. So I've seen some amazing things, and I'll share an example with you, and maybe it's a little bit detailed example, but I think it's important for people to hear. So,
Sure.
um, as I mentioned, we're highly Asian culture. Um, I had an employee. Um, we'd hired her to do some kind of testing, um, basically run a test. And she went to the customer and spent 6 months over there learning how to run the test. And we brought her back, and then she's running the test. And I'm out there on the floor and I'm watching. And one of the things I noticed about her was, during the breaks, she was at other stations learning how to do work. And she was engaging in each of the different operations that we had for this process. And there became a time when we needed to put a new leader in for that line. And I said, well, you know, I'd like to put you in as leader because you, I see you out here, with every one of these processes, I see you doing the work. And she was a little reluctant at first to step up with that. And there are a few times I had to go to the floor and emphasize, look, she's the leader of the organization. Of the line. I'm gonna support her
Right.
in her decisions, and I trust in what she's going to do. And so she even got to the point of soldering, which, hand soldering. So for us, one of the highest skill sets that we have is somebody who can do hand soldering.
Right.
And she worked with one of our other hand solderers who, taught her, again, during their breaks and during lunch to solder. So now she's, fully certified. And she actually, we sent her to be an instructor, to get trained as an instructor for soldering. So the story comes about around that. So we had a change that we had to do on one of our product lines, and
Change, you mean?
Yeah, there was a change in the process.
In the process. Okay, got it.
There was an engineering issue that we had to overcome, and I went out and as an engineer, putting my engineer hat on, having fun. I came up with a solution and I put it in place. And I walked down the line, I'm thinking, okay, this is really great. And she comes to me and says, well, this is good, but this is how you can improve it. And I'm like, wow, the student is now teaching the teacher. So for
Awesome.
me, that's very incredible. So that's the power that I see in spending time and in investing in people in different parts of the organization.
Let me just say a few more things that I caught off of that. One is, and I think this is a big gap in our industry, is and I call this having a long-term view, because it's not only fixing the operation, it's like building a really high-performing team. And so you having the emotional intelligence to know the culture of your workforce, how they like to interact, and being flexible as a leader to meet them where they're at and doing that. Second, the talk about spending the time, but also observing and seeing who's who's showing interest, who has that talent that you can actually invest in and develop, and look
Right,
at
exactly.
all the positive things that have come up from that. But I did want to ask, I was curious about, a lot of times I see that people, in a lot of cases, rightfully so, promote from within someone that displays strong technical abilities. But what I also notice is that oftentimes, stepping into a leadership role from whatever level, from an engineer to now a manager, or from an operator to a production lead or supervisor, it's a transition. You're going to lead people that were your peers or maybe even senior to you. And so I feel like a lot of manufacturers, I guess, don't give people the tools to lead, because that's a different skill set. Evidently, you've learned us from either your own learning, your teachings, but a lot of times people don't have that advantage. So how do you compensate for that, or how do you make sure that people have the tools on the people leadership side to be successful, above and beyond the technical side of things?
So that is a very tough question. I will I don't yeah, I think the person who can find the nugget to that answer could probably sell a lot of books. I think in manufacturing, we're heading down the highway. It's 50 miles an hour. In Texas, it's 70, but and you got to change a tire, and that's a tough thing to do. When you look at we try to be as efficient with people as possible in their time, and really, I think a lot of organizations struggle that the making the time to teach people. But I also think it's a two-way street too. So, one of the I think I got a couple things I'll share with you. When I was working on my PhD, I was interested in the medical industry, and I'd always wondered why doctors in their residency would spend 4 days straight at the hospital or whatever they do. It's a huge amount. I'm like, do I want somebody who hasn't been sleeping for last 18 hours to be working on me? And one of the things that I learned is that they need to put the time in, and because you need to have the experiences that are there. So when I started out in my career, I never went home before my boss. I worked hours, and I worked at night so part of that education that you're talking about I think first has to start with the person. You have to be willing to put your time and put your effort into, into learning. And some people are going to have good opportunities and have a lot of resources, and some may not. But part of it's all up to what you do. I think the other thing is, for me, there's a difference between a coach and a mentor. A coach is working on your skill set. A mentor is giving you opportunities to be successful. So I tend to view myself more as a mentor. So there are people in our organizations that I've put them in place that maybe is above their knowledge level, especially in terms of managing people. But then I'm there for them to be a mentor and an example. I had a wonderful quality engineer. She's very intelligent. She's very passionate. But when she gets excited, her voice level goes up, not from stress, but just from her excitement. But sometimes when she's talking to somebody, especially from a different culture, that gets them on edge. So sometimes I'm like, okay, just bring it down just a little bit, and you're making the points, but just you kind of relax in how you do that. So so a lot of it's going to be, for what I found, for what I would have to work through, is going to be what I'm willing to give. What I as a leader, the time I spent mentoring people. I mean, interesting, in running a company, my focus is a lot more people focused. I've got the financials, sure. I've got the technical aspects and the processes and stuff like that. Where I spend a majority of my time is just working with people in communicating skills and how to get their ideas across, how to lead. And I wish there was somebody like me earlier in my life, because sometimes
a mentor, you mean?
Yeah, a lot of people will say I'm very smart, and it's interesting because as I was going through my career, and I had these ideas and I had all this knowledge, and I'd be writing these emails and I'd be explaining everything, and now as a COO, I get one of these emails and I go, oh my God, is this how I sounded to my leaders? Not that it was a bad thing, but it's like, oh, this is just way too much detail. I don't need to know how the sausage is made.
Yeah. I guess, paint something out from what you said earlier. You said that, I think what you said earlier about taking that person and they have to show some level of initiative. I think it comes back with what you said earlier about having that curiosity, like, hey, going and finding and what have you. And I think you're absolutely right there that I can't want it for you. You gotta want it. You gotta have the spark. But I do find some cases, they're not the majority, of course, but some cases, the person wants it, but they're hesitant. Sometimes there's confidence issues there, but you see the diamond in the rough. So those are some others that maybe, I guess, you have to reach them out and pull them in, and then they get moving. And others just have self initiative.
So to some extent, if we talk from a leadership perspective, the lady I mentioned, so she became, she was a line worker, then she became a team leader. Now she's a group leader. From a leadership perspective, that is where she was at, right? I mean, she had knowledge of the process and things like that, but she didn't have the confidence to be the leader, to make the decisions. But what I saw in her was that she cared about the process and she cared about the people that she worked with. And
So leadership traits.
it would be it would be interesting because sometimes as I get busy and I go down to the line and I'll say great job so and she'll come back to me and says, no, it's the team that did that. I said, thank you, you're right, it was your team, but you're leading that team. So there are people, as a leader, we have to be out looking for those people, the ones that have that potential. They may not even see it in themselves, that they have that potential.
Yes.
And that's where the mentoring part comes into. That is, let me give you some opportunities slowly and build this up to build up your confidence, and then support you and support you when you do things right, but also support you when you run into trouble, and help you work through that process.
As you become, you work your way through the ranks of an organization, and you become more distance on your responsibilities from the value add, the tactical. It becomes more about spotting talent, developing talent, managing people and their emotions, and having that emotional intelligence more than anything. So I know we're running a little bit slow on time. I can't not ask you. You did some work with the government, with the Army. Tell me about what was that experience like? Discipline, that authority, not authoritarian necessarily, but an authority-based culture. What was that like in contrast to the corporate world, and what lessons did you learn from that experience?
Interesting, because there's a lot of similarities between the corporate world, but there are a lot of differences. I actually worked in the Pentagon, and one of the things I will share, as a leader, you have to have a level of situational awareness. And part of that, that's me going on the floor. I have to have situational awareness on the floor. One of my sayings, people, when I'm interviewing them, they're asking me about manufacturing, as I say, manufacturing is predictable, controlled mass chaos. I've got an hour commute coming in. I may have 5 things on my mind that, this is what I'm going to do. I get to work and there are 15 things I had no idea even existed in this world that I got to deal with. It's like, where did that come from? So there's a lot of differences between the cultures too. I remember, as a consultant going in, this is my first venue as being a consultant, and one of the consultants had, they didn't get their bag in, and they came in a jacket or something, and one of the leaders there took them down to your store and said, buy yourself a tie. Don't ever show up into this in this office without a tie. So there's very strict discipline. I worked. I started out basically. I was teaching green belts. I was teaching black belts, and I went up to program management. Then I was basically the consultant for the Army. So I worked directly with the office, and then taught the Master Black Belt program. And being in that office environment, there are protocols that go. I worked for a retired command master sergeant. One thing I knew, when you're in that environment, you never go over somebody's head. You never go meet somebody without your leader knowing or approving that. I actually saw a program manager she was working on a different program, same guy, same command master sergeant, oversaw her work, but her husband knew a general over at the Pentagon, and this command master sergeant walked by the office and saw her talking to him, and next day she was gone. So there are a lot of similarities in the process too. I mean, they're people. They all care about their jobs. They all want to be successful. I think that it's tough to bringing about change is very difficult. As a leader, going back to my engineering background, a company is a system, and if you want to change a system, you have to put energy into that system. There's no going about it. You can't create change without putting energy in. It's like when you want to learn something, you got to spend more time. You got to spend more time on that to learn it. So as a leader, I got to bring in energy. There's several ways to bring in energy. Money, and that's a big motivator of energy, but also the enthusiasm of the leader. That's the other part. How enthusiastic is the leadership? How can you build that culture where people are really enthusiastic and supportive? So when you're working in the areas like the Pentagon and things like that, you have to use that energy that you bring, as a consultant, to bring in change. I had people come into class, colonels. I had one general that came in that, like, why am I doing this? And at the end of the week, just because of my passion and energy, they're like, oh wow, I mean, I didn't realize what this was all about. I didn't understand how important continuous improvement could be in the environment. So
let me add one thing. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think one thing you said earlier that kind of tie it, because it may not be glaringly obvious, but bringing questions too that make people kind of have that, oh, I never thought about it that way. I think that also sparks energy in people and opens them up to a different perspective where they're now starting to open up to doing things in a different way.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. Especially when you've got curious people. If you got curious people and you've got questions, you can go so much further. There's a lot of different answers, and it can take you a lot of different paths. Even things that can be applied in the future. So, maybe something's not going to work, but somebody asked a question, and 6 months later, it's like, oh wow, we asked this question back then. Can we go back and address that? I've seen that happen too.
So let's go back to your present day after this path through, and I know we skipped some there, but tell us about NCA. You've joined it. You've been there 6 years. What was the situation? What were some of the challenges before we wrap up?
So I came to NCA early. Actually, today's my 6th year, as a matter of fact.
Wow! Congrats. Timely, huh?
I just realized that. So I came in. We're a small manufacturing facility, but we've got a lot of different capabilities, more than most contract manufacturers do in the PCBA area. We can do box builds, we can do cables. There's a lot of capabilities that we have. I think one of the challenges that hit, I think, our team very hard, just coming in, is this was just before COVID, and yeah, in that process, we were learning stuff. We were coming in that day learning about, okay, now how are we going to control it? What are we going to do about this? Okay, somebody had COVID, they just called in. What are we going to do? How how are we going to control people's emotions? We were considered an essential business, so we were able to stay open. But even that, from a legal perspective, what's all the paperwork that I had to have and have the employees have so that they when they're driving, they don't get pulled over and why are you out? There was a lot. So I would say from our perspective, I can only speak from our contract manufacturing electronic situation. It's night and day prior to COVID and after COVID. When you look at supply chain issues, when you look at investment of corporate money into financing, essentially, products that customers bring to us. The old model would have been, okay, we are going to go out and purchase all of your parts, and we're going to build it to you, and then we're going to deliver it to you, and then whatever net 30 days or whatever, we're going to get paid. Well, all of a sudden, when the whole economic shift came about, it's like we were in that model, and then people would go, well, now we can't pay. Now it's 30, 60, 90 days. Our cash is being put into inventory and labor to manufacture these parts. So we had to come up with different strategies. So the model has changed a lot in the contract manufacturing world, where we have to have a little more of those shared risks. When I meet with a new customer, and we're talking about, because everybody wants everything, as cheaply as they can get it with the highest quality. And what I share with them is, for me, it's all about risk. Okay. If you can help me reduce my risk, then I can help reduce the cost. Now, that risk might be in engineering design. It might be a financial risk. It might be a delivery risk, a schedule risk. Help me reduce that risk, and we can work together to give a lot better price. Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of this that changed in 2 years or so that is still working its way through. I mean, we worked through the part shortages, and it was incredible.
So that as much as you can share, right? But your cash to cash cycle got stretched, all working capital bloated up with inventory and putting into labor and all that good stuff, and yet clients wanted equal or better terms, possibly. Can you maybe share a few ways that you manage that? Because I would assume 60 to 80% of people are dealing with that out there, with that aftermath. So I'd love to hear what worked for you in managing that, because that can put a strain into an organization's resources.
So, one of the you have to be able to have difficult conversations with people, and that's, even I'm going to say, if you want to become a leader, even with your staff, with your employees, with your customers, you have to have difficult conversations. It doesn't mean that it's negative. It doesn't mean that it's disruptive or anything like that. It's just mean we have to talk about things that are hard. So for us, we went through a process of we slowly implemented, we called customer deposits. So we would want to get some of the money up front, not all of it, but we want them to have some skin in the game, because a lot of times they would want us to build the product, and they would sit on it for a while, and we couldn't deliver it. So we wanted them to have some of this skin in the game. But we also want to be transparent with them. So we we do let customers come. We let them go on the floor and see their products, talk with the people, and also try to provide them solutions and understand, from their perspective, how can I help them reduce their costs too? How can I help reduce their risks also?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And so, we would talk about solutions like, delivery. Okay, so, we can work with this delivery in some ways, but here maybe it's a little more tricky for us. Can we negotiate something for those more difficult parts of the process? I don't think there's like one solution that fits everything. For us, as much information as we can get forward, and just understand, as I said, controlled, predictable mass chaos. If a customer can come to me and say, look, we're going to be hurting, this next few months, not being able to make payments, what can you do for us? There are opportunities that we could provide, or how we can help them with that, as long as that, they come through on that agreement and fulfill that. Because I know, we're working with one customer for the medical product, and it's several $1 million. The owner of this company is a co-owner of an engineering company. They did the engineering, we did the prototyping and the manufacturing, and so I was involved in that process for manufacturing this. But they're just now starting to get their sales team together to go out and sell these. So we work with them. Okay, what does your schedule look like? Give us a heads up on when you're going to need product. From our perspective as a contract manufacturer, I may have 40 different customers on the line, and of those 40, I may have 60 different products between those 40, and it's like putting a Tetris puzzle together. We're trying to keep the machines running, and we're trying to minimize the switchovers. So as much information as people can give us a heads up on is what we work with. So that's when I'm working with the customers, I'm like, just share what information you have. Whatever the difficult things are, share it with me, and we can work out the solution together. As NCA, we're in for the long term. We're looking for long-term partnerships with people. Not that we don't understand there are people that they need to have a prototype built, and they're going to go to Mexico to do production, or Asia to do production. We understand that, and that for us is fine. We will help people with the prototyping, and our value add is to be able to feed back to them what are some of the challenges in the manufacturing process. So we work in those realms too.
I guess what I'm extracting from you, there's not one way. I guess it's more of a principle and mindset approach, whereas how do we partner, how do we minimize the risk, and how do we find ways to make this as positive, financially speaking, right, and business wise. Thank you so much for taking the time, Stephen. Welcome. This has been an amazing journey. I'm in my mind, I'm thinking I could see a part 2 to this potentially.
I'm up for a part 2.
Okay, so we learned about culture, reading people, emotional intelligence, curiosity, having the initiative, and all of that. So, Steve, if someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best place to find you from our listeners' perspective?
So I think people can just send me an email. My email address is stephen.lehocky @gmail.com. Now that's from a kind of personal, if hey, I just want to get to know Steve, email me there. If you're interested in NCA, you can Stephen.Lehocky and it's ncatx.com. If you're interested in NCA and what we have to offer, our website is www.ncatx.com. Those are excellent ways to get a hold of me.
All right, sounds good, Stephen. Thanks again so much.
Yeah. Also LinkedIn.
Of course, yes, LinkedIn, and it's Stephen Lehocky, no middle name or other names, right? Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's correct.
We'll have a link on the description, so if people want to connect with you and learn more about you, the leader, or more about NCA in that regard. Thank you, folks, for listening. We'll put this up in the YouTube channel, and if you're a manufacturing leader that wants to, you have a perspective or you want to share your story, please send us a note, and we'll be happy to have you and have a conversation about that. All right, thanks everyone, and we'll see you next time.